Hello everyone, welcome back into the studio for more Young Slave by Michelangelo. We're continuing on from last time with the block-in of this figure. For those new viewers here, this is a small-scale master study of Michelangelo's Young Slave sculpture that we're doing in Chavant NSP medium oil-based clay. If you're interested in seeing more or learn sculpture directly from me, check out my Patreon page linked below. Let's get into it. As you're working in and around areas like the arch of the ribcage, for example, it's important to keep at the forefront of your mind structural integrity. The ribcage being a unit within our sculpture, a bony mass, means that we need to have it be consistently shaped, or needed to have a consistent shape that feels solid and bony, not organic, bent, and soft. So for example, if the ribcage starts to twist and have a front plane that changes as we go from the bottom to the top, like it's rotating within itself, then it will look soft and organic and not as a solid bony mass. If you think of the ribcage as being very flexible, you will be missing the forest for the trees. You're thinking too small and your work will suffer for it. Thinking of the ribcage as a solid creates work that feels more grounded and feels more solid. A really hard thing to accomplish is to sell the illusion of internal solidity in sculpture, since the sculpture does not have any internal solidity, of course. It's all fake. So when you're adding clay to part of the ribcage, be careful that you understand where the front plane of the ribcage is meant to be facing, and reference that to make sure that the entire ribcage functions with that front plane in mind. The modeling phase, or the modeling stage, whatever you want to call this part of the process, for me, the part of the process where we're working on not making sure things are in the right place, but working on making them look as we'd like them to look in the final piece. Working towards the surface, essentially. This is what I like to call modeling. It's a thing that has more to do with intention rather than the actual work involved, of course, but let's try to break it down in a way where we can talk about the work taking place as well, to make sure that it's somewhat easy to understand. Here, the beginning of the modeling stage starts by reducing the depth between the forms and slowly starting to blend them together a bit more, essentially introducing a proper transition between the forms for the first time. This is done by adding clay and not by dragging clay from the forms into the transition. This is an important point to make, since the addition of clay makes it possible for the surface to seem soft and unified, while dragging the clay from one form into the other would not serve the same purpose to the extent that we'd like it to, and sort of make the sculpture look flat at the same time. We often break down the modeling stage into 4 parts: shape, plane, volume, and transition, but those are perhaps more the components that we manipulate during the modeling stage, and not so much the order of operations necessarily. I try to build into the block-in 3 of those 4 components, namely shape, plane, and volume. This helps the block-in resemble the model in a more concrete way, in my opinion. Then, to start modeling, I add transitions and then sort of start over again, reworking shape, reworking plane, reworking volume, and then finally doing transitions again. As I said, once the surface is unified, new drawing or redrawing of the shapes can happen over the top. This is not going to be the best example of such a thing here in this sculpture, as there is less redrawing that needs to take place, since the piece is so much smaller, and also the shapes are fairly simple. A larger piece is going to deserve and need much more specific drawing compared to what something like this might need. Therefore, it's going to require more time spent drawing and more rounds of redrawing each individual shape, and of course, how they all fit together. Notice that even while this is happening, I maintain a bit of my center line so I can be certain that I'm not working my sculpture out of being structurally sound. Keeping the center line present in the work is going to be of a huge benefit, even though it seems like something only a beginner would need to concern themselves with. I don't think that's true. I think keeping most of the center line visible throughout the entire process is both useful and vital to beginners and experienced sculptors alike. It's very easy to model things out of whack. It's very tough to judge what you have until you actually see it for what it is, and that can only really start happening once the piece comes to a certain place in the process where it's starting to look somewhat completed. At that point, it's so important to slow down and start asking yourself all of these questions so that you can reevaluate what is there, what it is that you've done. Usually I find that even if I've done a decent job, there are things that need to change and needs to be adjusted. Things that I had missed or mistakes that I had made before I got my work to a place where it almost seemed close to being finished and I was able to properly judge it. Be careful to retain as much volume as possible when using the rake. There are ways to use the rake, and there are ways where the rake can cause some problems. You'll notice, for example, that I'm only using the rake to lightly pass over the surface, not really digging into the surface very much, especially when I'm unifying it. If there are negative dimples and holes in the surface, I will go back with more clay and add back over the top. This keeps me from using the rake to dig through the volume of each form to unify, thus flattening out the forms and making my sculpture less volumetric, and thus less exciting. As you can probably see here, the sculpture isn't really all at the same stage. There are places that still need to have more work done to them before we could begin the modeling stage. This is rather typical for me, I find, and something that, while perhaps seemingly random, is something that is actually planned and thought through, and sort of something that I want to have happen. Some areas of the piece closer to the center where it all started, which is going to be the pelvis or the box of course, are more likely to be right at the moment. Therefore, the modeling can start there at an earlier time than, say, around the feet or the arms. However, the reason I do this is because I find that it's much nicer to have a sculpture that needs to have different things done to it. This way I'm not working in exactly the same way everywhere all at the same time for prolonged periods of time. The rake is used to unify the surface, create even texture, and at the same time give us an organic surface that looks and appears a little bit more like skin. Minus the texture, of course. The rake performs all of these tasks at once if we're using it well. The motion and direction that you rake in matters a lot. In addition to potentially removing too much volume when raking, you also run the risk of creating flat spots or forms that appear soft and round. I try to rake across the form first and foremost. This means not in the direction that the clay was applied in. The clay is applied with the direction of the form, and the rake is moved across the direction of the form. Good examples of the direction of the form would be the length of the thighs, for example. This would be with the form, and this would be against the form. The thinking can then be applied everywhere for the same result. While raking across the form is a good place to start, there can be a bit more nuance to it than that. Not only should you rake across the form, you should also rake perpendicular to the drawing of the outline of the form. This means that depending on where you are, where within the form you're rendering, the direction the rake should travel as it moves across the transition from one form to the other changes. Here's an example of the direction the rake should travel if we were thinking of the oblique and implying such a principle. That gets to be a little bit difficult in such a small scale, of course, but I do try my best to implement this technique here, especially in those larger regions. In larger scales, where the forms are larger and therefore easier to deal with in terms of specific directions, you don't have to have the fidelity of a surgeon in order to do the right thing. In larger scales, it's going to be a little bit easier, and this trick becomes more valuable than ever, and will make a sneaky big difference in your work. The sculpture we're referencing, Young Slave by Michelangelo, does have marble filling pretty much every negative space that could potentially be there. Negative space is essentially a space between the legs, for example, or something similar to that. Parts of our sculpture that are essentially not really there, there's no material there, or there shouldn't be material there, but it's still sort of part of our sculpture, if you will. Those spaces are called negative spaces. These negative spaces often look really cool in my opinion, and create a sense of realism and of lightness to the work. However, it does make work much more difficult to bring from clay form into something more permanent. Any casting of a sculpture with an opening between the legs is going to have to contend with the thin ankles supporting a lot of weight, for example, all the weight of the figure on a really thin section of material at the ankle. A solution could be to create thicker ankles, but this is a bad solution. Michelangelo would in his marble sculptures create a supporting element at one leg, since the marble can't support all the weight of the whole figure on thin ankles either. The marble would essentially crack and the figure would fall over. Therefore, you're going to see some sort of element around the lower leg, one lower leg, of most of standing marble figures. Things like this little fawn character in the Bacchus, for example, or the tree stump in the David, are examples of this supporting element. And you'll see similar things in most standing marble pieces, I'd say. So I decided to fill the negative space between the legs on this piece, connecting this space with the base itself and making it seem somewhat unfinished and rough. Since the legs are brought fairly close together, I don't think this is going to make a huge difference in the piece. If the sculpture was bigger and more ambitious, I would not do this, I think. Or if the legs were much further apart, I would not do this, as it would become much more obvious and to me, therefore, much more problematic. That's it for this week's video. Please consider liking the video and subscribing if you enjoyed it. Check out my Patreon page for more, and until next time, stay creative.